4:44 p.m. on Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. This is Brian Layton, the school committee chair. I am calling the special school committee meeting to order. In accordance with the requirements of open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being broadcast at a later date over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. The agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. The first item on the agenda is new business, finalist candidate interview for superintendent of schools, Brent Conway. So I'd like to introduce Brent Conway. We are going to be doing a 75-minute interview. When there's 35 minutes left, you'll be notified that there's 35 minutes left, and when there's 10 minutes left, you will also be again notified that there'll be 10 minutes left. We have time for an opening statement, 13 questions, and then a closing statement after the 75 minutes. So I will turn it over to you, Brent, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much for having me here. Had a great day today, spending the day in classrooms in all the buildings. Got to see different grade levels, see students and staff members, and it was good. It's good to be here. Good vibe throughout the community for sure. So appreciative of the opportunity to come back, and the screening committee, feeling as though I was worthy to be a finalist. So as far as an opening statement, I think I look forward to the opportunity to engage with you tonight. My career has spanned well over 25 years as a classroom teacher. Spent time teaching literacy, science, and as a special ed administrator as well, as a team chair, and then becoming a principal. I was a principal in Melrose for 12 years, both at the elementary and middle school level, with pretty good success, becoming a National Blue Ribbon School, the elementary school for closing achievement gaps for our students with disabilities. And in the last 7 years, I've been the assistant superintendent with the Pentucket Regional School District, which is in West Newbury, Merrimack, and Groveland, because no one knows where that is, so we tell them where that is. It's been a wonderful experience being in Pentucket, I think there's a lot of similarities actually between what Lunenburg has been going through and where you're headed to what our experiences have been in Pentucket as well. So I don't live far from here, live in Tewksbury. My wife, 2 boys, one's in high school, one will be in high school next year. And I think, as you begin to look for a superintendent position and you think that's what you want to do, you want to make sure you find a community and a school district that is a match for you. So as you are interviewing me tonight, I spent the day sort of, the last so many weeks actually, really digging into and looking into who Lunenburg is as a town, a community, the school district, and the work that's been done, and what work lies ahead. I think that's why I continue to pursue this position, and I think I'm a pretty good fit for what you need, and hopefully that comes through tonight. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Do I ask the first question?
You were
That's
first.
fine.
All right. Why Lunenburg?
Well,
More to the question.
Oh.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Keep it consistent, yeah.
I'm going to read a script. These are not questions I would want to ask. I think this is a bad way to do this. However, why Lunenburg? Why at this point in your career? Why do you feel this place is the right fit for you at this moment in your career? What about this exact role moved you to apply?
okay. So I think, some of those I addressed certainly in the opening statement, and I think, from a deeper perspective, the size of the school district community is a draw. About 12,000 people, 1,500 students. You have a middle high school as well. You have a model of a middle high school. We have that in Pentucket as well. We built a middle high school. We built a brand new building. In fact, when we were looking at school buildings as models, this was actually one we came out and saw. And reminded me as I pulled up the first time a few weeks ago, and I said, oh, yep, no, I remember this with the sort of the central office, or the office in the middle and everything. So, you know, and so I think from that perspective, there's a lot of carryover from the work that I've done and the connections and the way I've done the work in Pentucket that would lend itself to what needs to happen here. You know, why now? Well, now is a time for me where I feel like I'm ready to be a superintendent. So the last 7 years working in Pentucket, really almost like a co-superintendent role. Both the superintendent and I started at the same time. And we came to a place that did not have a lot of systems and structures in place. Wonderful people who were working really hard to do really good by kids. And that was some of the work we did, as I've described. We had a district of schools, not a school district. So we needed to do a lot of that work. I think some of that work's been done here in Lunenburg as well, but I think there's probably more work to be done with that. That being said, I know like Lunenburg, like many suburban communities around Massachusetts, have been struck by some really difficult financial decisions and situations. Yours is sort of compounded by the fact that you've had change in leadership at the town level and those support structures that might carry you through some unknowns weren't necessarily there. And I think that the community seems to be looking for trust moving ahead in how we can bring some stability to what the school district has from a budgetary standpoint, some projections, so that they know what to expect. We've experienced some of that same work. That has been my experience in Pentucket as well. We have 3 very different communities, and their capacity, willingness, or ability to pay all vary and provide funding. We have seen the impact of decreased state aid to the school district, and I know you have seen that as well. In fact, I provided you with an analysis that's sort of visual. There's a few graphs in there, and you know, I've seen your state aid go down, which means the local taxpayers need to pick up more of it. We've seen the same thing in 10 years in Pentucket. We went from 40% state aid down to 29%. And you're seeing a similar decline in the past 5 years. I think some of the creative solutions we've been able to apply to keep programs moving for students, to keep things moving ahead, are things that I hope I can, you know, talk about here and bring forward here. So I think hopefully I'm that person for you, and I look forward to more questions around this.
Any follow-up on that by the committee?
What were the solutions that you?
Yeah. So we've had a few different ones. And you know, we start getting into budget situations and you start thinking about it. One of the things we instituted was like a state of the schools address, and it would be something that I would think would work really well here in Lunenburg. The timing of that tends to be in the fall, late October, early November, in which I would prepare that as a superintendent. Who's present there? Your select board, your FinComs. It's sort of like a broader stakeholder group. But the work in the state of the schools is identifying what the strengths are. Basically telling a story through data. So it's great to have a point of data, but then you need to have a narrative that attaches to it. And there are some really good success stories in Lunenburg that we want to be able to highlight, connect it to the narrative, and that type of state of the schools allows you to set the framework for what comes ahead for the budgetary needs. If this is the school district we want, and these are the achievements we have seen, this is what it costs. The superintendent cannot advocate or say we need an override. That is not the role of the superintendent. That's the role of the school committee. The superintendent can say, here is the success that we've had. These are the outcomes you're getting. This is what it costs. And from there, that sort of sets the stage moving ahead of how do we finance that education that we want for our students. So that state of the schools is one way to sort of build a broader awareness. It's sort of a communications plan to help people understand what's at stake and what's at play. Some of that is also describing the fiscal realities of what has gone on in decreasing in state aid, the changes in the demographics and all of that. The other things we've done, we've actually raised revenue to help close a budget gap. We had a $2.5 million budget gap this year. We were able to raise revenue by offering programming in the summers, by increasing preschool opportunities for families, and we also increased some rental income for different usage of the facilities. And then we put our transportation out to bid. And that bid alone, so 3-year contract, 3 years ago was $4.5 million for us. We had competition this time around. And the competition was stirred on because one of the competitors lost another contract near us. So we had competition. That same 3-year contract came in at $2.5 million. So we were able to raise revenue from the sense that we have less expense related to transportation. Some of that is timing, but we knew it was coming and we were able to leverage it and build it into the budget process. And some of that is anticipating where those things are and being able to stagger them out. So.
Any other follow-up? All right.
Okay, well, looks like we jumped right on the next question. To discuss your operational experience in budgeting, what staff do you rely on the most for budget preparation and why? How far out should a school district reasonably be projecting out their budgets? We've had a lot of talk about 5-year forecasts and that kind of thing. And what does the budget preparation process look like for you? What has worked well for you or not with respect to software or processes for preparation and information sharing?
Mm-hmm. Lots of questions in there.
That's a lot of
Yes,
questions.
yep. So hopefully I can loop in with several of the things you have there. So I certainly do have fairly extensive experience with operational budgeting in Pentucket, for instance. So my role as assistant superintendent covers more than just curriculum and instruction. That certainly is a big part of it. Oversee human resources, civil rights coordinator for the district, oversee all the grants, and I'm part of the team of 2 or 3 people that generally develop the school district budget. As a regional district, some of the aspects are very different than a town, for sure. To some extent, we run a little bit like our own municipality. But I also understand what a town budget looks like and how that develops with schools. I've actually worked in a city before too, which that functions a little differently as well. So, as far as how do you develop a budget, you start with much the same way I talked about, like using a couple of key data points and outcomes around how the students are doing. Your budget should largely be driven by your strategic objectives. What is it that you're trying to achieve as a school district? And that should be clearly reflected in your budget. And when it's not reflected in the budget, you have to go back and say, are these really our objectives now? Maybe our objectives have changed because we don't have the funding capacity to do that. So that whole strategic plan that you work on 5-year cycles, that's very much part of your budget cycle. And student outcomes, and in particular addressing needs of students, should also be really reflected in that budget. So who are the key people at the table? Well, you need to have your good business manager who is able to understand and manage the line items that you have in front of you, the historical trends of how you use them, and be able to anticipate what those updated changes are. Your special ed director is a key figure involved in this. That's a big budget driver for sure. Along with sort of anyone else in your central office team that has a sense of department budget drivers. You have a new facility director who's with you, an opportunity to meet him today, being able to understand, if we budgeted this much for certain aspects of our facilities last year, what is a reasonable increase the following year? We also, as a town, this is not a budget situation that the school district can solve on its own. We need to have partnerships with the town. So you have a new town manager who's with you as well, and she's certainly watching some of the meetings. She seems to have her head on her shoulders pretty squarely and has a good sense of how to develop a budget. The key aspect as well is working with the town because they are better able to project some of the things on the town side that might be coming. The example is, one of the big budget drivers is insurance. And health insurance for employees has been a budget buster the last few years. There are reasons why, but that has been an absolute nightmare to deal with. When you get rates of 12, 14, 15%, that far exceeds what 2.5% or even 3%, which is even aggressive growth a little bit, comes in at. So those are some people we're going to work to do that with, but then you're working with your building principals. This district is small enough and you have a small enough administrative team that communication cycle with your building principals around needs of buildings, anticipated needs, upcoming needs, that all of those are part of an ongoing discussion. Nothing should be as a surprise, but you have that. When does it start? For me, it would probably start by August. July would be an opportunity to meet people. If they weren't on vacation, an opportunity to get to meet people. And that work would probably start in August fairly quickly. And then by October, that's when we actually start in earnest in really developing a budget like that. My understanding is you're using Munis software, but there's been an update to it as well. And maybe some of that has been some of the hurdles to jump through as well. So Munis software is certainly a tool that would be very helpful to us. But at the same time, those Munis spreadsheets are not overly digestible by a lot of members of the public, right? They're a little dense. And sometimes we have to present data in ways that are a little bit more in chunks that are digestible by members of the public, especially around some key figures that we want them to understand. And in some cases, simple pie graphs, bar graphs are some of the best tools to do that, make them a little more visual, a little more appealing. I know they give away awards for great budget books. That's not necessarily the goal or objective. We want to be able to communicate both to members of the voting community and then members of the public too. So.
Thank you. Any follow-up by the members?
I would just say that our budgeting has greatly been done through Excel, more than through Munis, but if you had any wonderful ideas on budgeting software, it has been kind of clunky, just so you know.
Yeah, and I think Excel can play a role in sort of that other part of being able to make things maybe more publicly digestible. But Munis, especially if it's holding your HR, you're able to do your projections through that. And if not, we can do them through Excel. I certainly have done that before as well, as far as salary projections, for negotiations, using even Google Sheets, for instance. Just being able to project out and replicate, and you can see multiple years out in anticipation of salary. Salary is the biggest driver. Education is a people business, and salary is the biggest driver. That and special education are our two biggest budget drivers. So.
Yes, Mrs. Sconberg.
If you were the superintendent and you had to produce a user manipulable budget to give to the town and say, anybody in town wants to come and check our books, here are the books. Could you have that delivered by September?
By this September?
Yes.
I guess that's a hard question to answer because I don't know in what format it currently exists.
Whatever format you want, just as long as it could be on the web, downloaded by a citizen of the town, and manipulated so they could have any budget question they want answered, provided they have the expertise to do it.
Yeah, I'm still not 100% sure I can answer it with full accuracy, but I think we could certainly have something that would be visibly available to them. And are you saying this September for the FY26 budget? Is that what you're asking?
The current school year in September, so the 26,
Yes, yeah.
25, 26,
Yep.
that budget.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the questions we get all the time in budget, and this is all we've been doing, is I went through and the numbers added up differently. So the problem is we don't have a public-facing version of the budget that people can go through and work on themselves.
Yeah.
And if we had that, we'd have a lot more trust from the town.
Yeah. So I think there certainly can be a document and a tool that would allow people to see that. But I think, as you know, when you sign warrants, for instance, and I don't know which one of you is the, you are, right? There are line transfers, right? As the year goes on,
Sure.
you make changes. And And some, well, that was done because we had to do this, and this was something, we need to add an extra kindergarten class in August. Well, guess what? The budget in September is going to look different than the one you voted and approved on here, right? And a lot of people don't understand that necessarily, and sometimes you have unused money that you end up using somewhere else, and those are things that are actually pretty common. And in fact, if you don't leave yourself that flexibility, you get yourself in a real jam. You have to have that flexibility. This is a people business, but it is a student-driven business. And if there's anything that is unpredictable, it is that of children and their needs. We can do a lot of predicting for preparation, but to be able to predict with precision is not really always going to be the reality. So we have to make our best estimates around it. We can look at historical trends, for instance. That's typically pretty important to look at trends. And we can do that, but some things change and we're not able to prepare for them. You have students who move in, you have people resign, you have maternity leaves that need to be covered that create ripple effects. And every little thing has a ripple effect within that budget. But in short, yes, I think there's a visual tool that someone would be able to use and get a good sense of the budget in the broad categories. To the specifics, I guess I wouldn't be able to know unless I knew how it existed within the system now.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
How would those who have worked under you describe you as a leader? What concrete actions have you taken to empower those around you to make decisions and move into leadership roles?
It's a great question. So I hope you get a chance to speak to some references. Some of those references are, in fact, supervisors, but some are, as you said, people who have worked under me. I think you would. There's certainly at least one common trend you would hear, and that Brent is who he presents to be, right? And that I don't try to be someone other than that. And that actually speaks back to maybe the first question of why Lunenburg, why now? Is I don't want to go somewhere and try to be the superintendent you need me to be. I want to actually be that person, right? And I think that's pretty important. So I try to be pretty authentic to who I am. I think people who worked under me would say Brent is pretty dogmatic when it comes to students first, and that the decisions are largely driven by what students need. And when we're in conflict about whether we do A or B, the question just goes back to, well, what is in the best interest of students? Now, sometimes the options of A and B aren't all, it's not a linear choice, right? So there's a lot of complexity to that. But I think that's what you would hear from them. I'd like to think of myself as a multiplier, and that for those who want to move into leadership roles, that I'm the one who helps to enable that. Or make them realize maybe that's not really what they want to do at the same time. That can be just as valuable. If you've ever had a mentor who sort of helped you through something, sometimes they help you realize you don't want to do particular things, right? So I've had the privilege of mentoring numerous principals and mentoring people as teachers to become principals as well. Some have gone on to those roles, been very successful, and others have chosen, after getting a taste of it, saying, that's not for me. I don't want to be in that leadership role. But leaders come in all sorts of fashion. Leadership's not a title. I think leadership is rooted in sort of your action. In fact, one of the things I talked about earlier today with the teachers is that, we have people have espoused beliefs. They have things that they say they believe. And then they have their actions. Sometimes there's a gap between their espoused beliefs and their actions, and it's leadership's job to help bridge that gap and bring that closer together. So that's what I try to do for people that I work with who are in leadership roles to make them more effective, is to empower them to do that with the people who work under them. And that we're able to enable people to bridge those two gaps, or that gap between those two concepts. I think that's really a key part of leadership. Sometimes people want to be in educational leadership because they see it as an opportunity to have influence. and to move things maybe at bigger scale than what they do. And then they begin to realize they're faced with conflict. And that becomes the realization of, are you comfortable dealing with conflict? Are you comfortable? You don't have to like it. In fact, we would think it's a little strange if you like it. No one likes conflict. But you have to be comfortable to be able to lean into conflict. And I think that's the piece that probably makes good leaders into great leaders, is that they can lean into conflict in an appropriate way, in a professional way, in a respectful way. So that's something I try to communicate with them and help them understand. That's typically a big difference maker between someone who ends up enjoying their work and feeling successful versus those who wake up in the morning and think, I do not want to go to work today. So.
Any follow-up? All right, I think we're going to go to Peter, if we can turn up the audio.
Okay.
Or Peter,
Can you hear me okay?
go a little louder.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Hello?
Yep.
I'm going to assume you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Mr. Conway, thank you, and I apologize that I'm unavailable to meet you in person, and I further apologize that
Oh, no.
about your experiences with school systems within a small town and the cultural issues that you might need to be aware of in this particular role. And if or how that could change how you approach the job.
So the concept of a school system in a small town, I work in a regional school district. We have 3 very small towns. And I've had the opportunity to work in a few other small towns. There's aspects of a small town that just make it fantastic as well. So I see the small town experience as a strength that brings to the community, and that so many more people are invested in the outcomes. It does not necessarily mean that they show up to everything. It does not necessarily mean that they're out there and all sorts of things. But people who live here, who are invested in the children, want what's best for their kids. It's that simple. That's what they want. And they wouldn't have chosen this community if that wasn't that opportunity. There isn't a lot of industry in town. It is largely residential. And when someone chooses to live here, they know that. They make that choice to live here. If they wanted a larger, more congested environment with other things that are available to them, they would have chosen to live somewhere else. So I understand some of the politics that are involved with that. I can tell you, I realized it when I went to Pentucket in my very first month in the job in the summer. I was introduced to the police chief, who then also introduced me to the fire chief. They were the same person, the police chief and the fire chief. And then he told me that his wife was the school committee member as well, right? And he has 2 children in the buildings. And, and that's when you begin to realize, like, oh, yeah, okay, there are a lot of people who do a lot of different things. And that is one of the things about small towns that I think I can appreciate the best, is that a lot of people are willing to do a lot of different things if it means that things are going to be better for them or their kids or their community. I've had an opportunity to sort of explore some of the things that Lunenburg has, and you think about your homecoming in the fall, the traditions, your steep tradition in the music and arts and athletics and all of those things. Those are outside of academics, but they're things that bring the community to the schools together. And those are things you see in small towns. You don't see those in larger communities all the time because there are a lot of other things for people to get involved with. So I think there's a lot of good opportunity there to leverage that. As far as my role, fully recognizing that I think as a superintendent and you have a town manager, that you have 2 people who are generally overseeing almost 100% of the town finances at that point, right? And you know, there wouldn't be anyone in town who wouldn't have some connection to the town manager or the superintendent for some reason or another. And I think it's an important thing to be aware of, but it means you have to be present in the community. And that's something that I want in a community and in a job. I want the community to want me to be there. Whether that is a Friday night football game, whether that is a musical performance, whether it's a community festival that's not school related, or maybe it's a cup of coffee on a Saturday at the coffee shop. So those are the types of things that I think are really valuable, and I see it as benefits of a small town, things not to concern or scare or push anyone away.
Thank you. Any follow-up by the committee members?
You said that you would want to leverage that, meaning leverage the small town aspects. How would you do that?
So I think being present for those things. I think community members would certainly value the fact that you were part of what is their tradition and history. And honoring their traditions, respecting it, and being part of it, being willing to be there and support it. People appreciate it in small towns. It's what sort of gives them a lot of pride in their community, and when that you can sort of share in that respect and pride, I think that becomes a point of leverage to be able to bring more people into your conversations around how well the schools are doing, what are the outcomes, and here's what we need to continue to make it happen, right? An ongoing discussion around how all of that connects together. In small towns, no one works in a silo. You have to work collaboratively because there's too many people who there's only a small number of people who are generally involved in a lot of different things, right? And I think that's the part where you really have an opportunity to spread your communication and your connections across the entire community that way.
Thank you. Any additional follow-up? All right, I have question number 5. Student safety encompasses far more than just physical security. It includes emotional well-being, feeling seen and supported, and having equitable access to learning. In your current or past leadership roles, what have you done to ensure all students feel safe and supported at school? And what role should community partners play, including but not limited to resource officers and comfort dogs, public safety departments? What challenges have you faced in student safety, and what are your goals moving forward? What does a truly safe school look like to you and from a student's point of view?
Yeah, I think you bring up two sort of big buckets of safety and what that looks like. And I don't know that any one student, I don't know that two students would give you the same exact answer. First, I'll address sort of the public safety and the role they play. So you have a small police department, you have a small fire department. It's a small town. But people's relationship with first responders in the community is likely pretty strong for the vast majority. There might be some who don't necessarily share that opinion. And that's a reality. We have to be aware of that as a reality. I know historically we've done a lot of work with our first responders. I know going to Pentucket, we had 3 different towns, 3 different police chiefs, 2 different fire chiefs. And we had to put some protocols, standard response protocols in place because all 3 towns were operating differently. So the schools became sort of the unifying component of bringing police and fire together about how we needed to proceed from a safety perspective. And we've been very successful with that. Talking with Dr. Burnham today and some of the administrators too, is that they have a regular, whether it's monthly or bi-monthly, safety meeting, which involves multiple stakeholders. And they do table talk exercises, walk through various scenarios, and it's how sort of the security upgrades continue to occur, whether it's the different types of doors, the walkie-talkies that were purchased, the 911 compliant phone system that was installed in a rather old building, right? To be able to pull that off is impressive. Those are the types of things. I've done those too in Pentucket, so I know how that works, and you have a list of things you're working through and you collaborate together on it to make it happen. At the end of the day, though, the school personnel is in charge of the kids in the school. So we're consulting with our first responders, and we want to partner with them. But then they consult with us on kids and families at the same time, right? It's a partnership. But that's not the only component of school safety. For a lot of kids, feeling safe in school is feeling as though they have someone that they connect with, that they do feel seen, for instance, and that they can be their authentic self, that they feel comfortable enough in that environment. Over the course of my career, I've done numerous things with that. As a middle school principal, we had the Safe and Supportive Schools grant. We did multiple years of that work in Melrose. I also worked with the ADL to bring in the World of Difference Institute, which was a student leadership group that did a lot of work around ensuring that students could be who they are so they could feel like they could belong. Coming to Pentucket, we ended up doing the same thing. And we had the Belonging Leadership Group, and those students continue to do that work. Feeling like you belong allows you to feel like your authentic self, and that you don't have to hide parts of who you are in order to fit in or just to be. And when students don't feel safe, whether it's emotionally, whether it's physically, no learning is occurring. So at the root of all learning and our outcomes is the fact that our students feel safe. What makes a student feel safe? Likely that they have at least one adult in school that they feel connected to. For our younger students, oftentimes it's just their classroom teacher, but it could be anyone. We've done a lot of work in Pentucket as well with the JED Foundation. We became a JED Foundation school district, or high school, where we analyzed our systems for suicide awareness and supports. And that resulted in some surveys that were done. We discovered that 82% of our high school students responded that they had an adult in the building who they could go to and speak to about anything that they were concerned about, which we were thrilled about. We thought that was a great number. And then we processed it a little bit further. We said, but that also means almost 1 in 5 kids do not. So as positive as that is, now we have to figure out our plan for the 1 in 5, right? So that work is not, that's not like, you don't install a program, for instance, right? That is about a culture and a climate that exists within a building and to some extent across an entire district. What is that climate, and do kids feel like they belong? And that's at the heart of the questions that we ask. And I've been fortunate enough to do that work. I'll actually, later this month, I'll be honored at the Essex County Law and Education Breakfast as the ADL's Educator of the Year. Myself and the superintendent from Swampscott and the police chief from Swampscott as well. So it said it's a Lifetime Achievement Award, which I felt like, does that mean I'm getting near the end? What does that mean? But very much appreciative and humbled by it too. But, yeah.
Thank you. Any follow-up from the committee members?
Yeah, so in talking about student safety, suppose there's a situation where a student off campus over Snapchat makes disparaging comments about a program at school and the kids in that program. What do you do?
What do I do as superintendent?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to contact the principal because it's likely a school disciplinary matter. But,
Is it?
Well, yes, it is.
Are you sure?
I'm quite sure about it.
Are you sure? Because there's a case that says it's not.
Well, so
So that's illegal. Are you aware of that?
so based on Massachusetts law, and
This is U.S. Supreme Court law,
Okay.
which trumps Massachusetts
all
law.
right, so I'll continue.
Okay?
So when something happens outside of school, contact the principal, because I don't get to make a snap decision about something. We do want to know, is everyone physically safe, number one? Is there any physical threat? Because saying something that's disparaging is different than making a physical threat. So if there are any threats, we have an immediate safety issue we need to deal with. Making disparaging remarks, you need to distill down what does disparaging remark mean. And Massachusetts bullying laws would suggest if there is cyberbullying that occurs, and that would constitute cyberbullying, that even if it's done off campus and it's been done multiple times, that might very well be a violation of the bullying law.
So I said program. I didn't say students. The question I asked you is if they made derogatory comments about a program at school.
Oh, about a program?
Correct.
Okay. So specifically about a program then, not necessarily, all right? And because programs can't necessarily be constituted to a specific student, unless those students were easily identifiable through that program as well. So it's, it becomes a bit of a gray area to some extent of whether those students are.
Are you sure it's a gray area?
Well, I don't have the
I'm
exact
telling you
case
it's
in front
not.
of you.
I told you twice now. it's
I
not.
can appreciate you're an attorney, I understand, and I don't have the exact case in front of me. So what I'm saying is, it's the school district's responsibility to investigate, to ensure whether there is or is not bullying, or whether there has been or it has not been a case of harassment. We don't get to determine that based on an immediate report. The report is what institutes our response, and our response is to investigate. And without further details, I can't conclude whether it is or it isn't. But just know that we do a full investigation, and we bear that out. Just because it happened off campus does not mean it's out of bounds for school, but it just depends upon exactly what it was. If what happened off campus has an impact on campus and can be reasonably suspected to be disruptive on campus, well, now we're sort of back into, well, then it's in bounds. So more details that would need to be laid out in order for me to give you the precise answer of whether it is or it isn't. But the right answer is administratively, we immediately conduct an investigation. And what that means is we're contacting the students involved, the parents involved, that we're conducting an investigation. And we're using the lens of, is this a harassment or civil rights issue? Is it a bullying issue? And we're applying the applicable laws as it is to that investigation. And then we come to a conclusion. And sometimes if we're not so sure, those principals a principal has an opportunity to bring that back up to either myself, and if we need to consult legal counsel, that we could, of where this falls.
Thank you. At this time, we have 35 minutes remaining. Any other follow-up on this question? All right, moving on to question 6, Mr. Scalabrini.
How much independence would you provide your department heads and principals in selecting their staff, and what would be the role of the superintendent in assessing the effectiveness of administration? What does an effective building administrator look like?
Well, principals by Massachusetts law do hire their staff in their buildings. So that is their job to do. And as their superintendent, I would want them to be able to do that. If I had to do that job, then we don't need them, right? Like that's one of those things. So we need to enable them to be able to do that well. My role is in having sort of a district-wide discussion around what is our process and how we vet, well, first advertise and recruit, and then how we vet candidates, and what does that process look like, so that the process at middle high school is as similar as it can be at Turkey Hill, or as similar as it can be at the early learning building. We don't want the process to be so entirely different that one could question our integrity around the process, for sure. So I think, largely from an HR perspective, we put some sort of process and protocols. These are the expectations that we go through. You're expected to call 3 references, and you need to have those down, all those types of things. We, might talk about how we would go about recruiting, and that there are some institutions of higher ed that are going to be far more prepared in giving you candidates who will meet the criteria that you're going to want, right, than others. Doesn't mean we rule others out, but we may look more heavily for someone who has a degree from a particular institution based on what you're looking for. The effectiveness comes in sort of the ongoing dialogue and conversations, but then also my time in that building, spending with them, and hearing, they think they're doing X. Is that what the community feels as well? Is that what the staff feels as well? Is that what the students feel as well? We tend to do annual surveys within our schools in Pentucket, and the surveys go out to staff and they go out to families, and it's feedback. It's not really just about the administrator, but it's about their school experience. Some aspects are around the administration. And it's a good sort of overview of how people feel. And you get a good sense of sort of the climate and the tenor. And you can also see some differences between buildings, because largely we're still the same community, and if you're seeing differences that way. How do you assess effectiveness of administration? Well, we do have our educator goals process that we go through. That's part of it. I am always very curious, so I do evaluate multiple staff members, the goals that they develop and how well they align with the goals that their educators, that they evaluate, how those align, and sort of the through line process of the connection of the work of the district. Or are they doing something that, quite frankly, they've actually been doing for 3 years, and they've sort of set up a goal that allows them to just sort of show that they're successful, when in reality it's not really pushing them to address the needs of the building. And that's really what it comes down to, is if you're an administrator, we have needs that we're trying to move to improve the building, improve the outcome of the students, improve the status of the building. Those are the goals I want to see you working on as an administrator. And then we talk about what are the skills and the strategies you need to achieve that. And how can I help you do it as well? That's a critical part as well. As your evaluator, what can I do to help you be successful in achieving those? I think those are some of the best conversations you can have. With administrators in a district this small, you can have a lot of one-on-one conversation time. And you get a real sense of how someone is doing. Going and sort of attending a faculty meeting and sitting in and watching the faculty observe. Attending professional development. Doing walkthroughs with the principal through the building and saying, what do you see? And it helps me gather whether the principal has a good sense of instruction, curriculum. It's okay, what did you see? How would you give feedback to this person? And that's very informal, but then we can have more formal processes around it too. So.
Thank you. Any follow-up from the members? All right, Ms. Ashenbaum.
Okay, I must be the budget person tonight. In our current budget situation, we've been forced to have conversations about what in our school system are nice to haves and need to haves. What drives your view behind the things in a district that are absolute necessities and what are just nice to have? How do you communicate these views and decisions, and who are the stakeholders?
Well, we certainly have a legal responsibility to some things, for sure. So that sort of starts right at the center. That's our work with our special ed department, for instance, but then also what are our graduation requirements and structures for that. I think those are sort of where it starts. We have compliance issues. We have to be compliant with the things that we essentially have a legal agreement to provide. So that's important there. I do believe it's important that teachers have curriculum. It doesn't necessarily mean we're buying curriculum out of a box, but that we do have curriculum that is research-based. And this is actually sort of my area that I work with pretty consistently. Notice I said research-based, not evidence-based, because actually a lot of the big Tier 1 curriculum programs have no evidence behind them. They've never been studied for effect. But they're based on research. So we need to make sure we're vetting it based on research so that we can reasonably expect outcomes. Another sort of must-have is the professional time and professional development. They need to have time within their schedules to do the planning that we're going to ask them to do, to number one, at minimum, meet the compliance demands, and number two, use the curriculum that we're asking them to use. We want them to understand how to use the data that's helping them to make decisions around what's being effective, what isn't, which student needs what. They need to have that time, and they need to have the professional development and the support to do it. Some of that comes from our administrators, some of that might come from some outside folks who are able to work with us. Those are all must-haves. Because all of that's around a core mission of educating our kids in some of the real critical aspects. And then we start to go a little step further and we think about what really do kids really need? Well, they do need to have technology and engineering experience. They need to have an understanding of that. We don't have to have every student graduate being able to master coding, for instance. That is, they don't have to be all Java trained. That is not what we're talking about. But they do need to have some digital understanding and skills and demonstration. We need to have the vast majority of our students engaged in a global language study. And the earlier we can do that for students, the better outcomes we will have. Don't know if the district's been able to engage in the Seal of Biliteracy work. It had, good, yep. But those are the types of things that sort of honor our students in multiple ways. So those are the types of things we start to talk about that are like must-have. And then we start to get into the other aspects that make school really a place where a lot of kids want to come. And sometimes it's not always the history class. It's not always the English class. It's not always that subject. It becomes some of the other subjects that kids develop a passion for, or it becomes outside activities like athletics and drama programs that are outside of it. It's hard to walk away and say they aren't must-haves, because for the vast majority of our kids, one of those things is the thing that gets them excited to come to school every day. And it's hard to think that those aren't must-haves, because if that's what gets a kid excited to come to school, it's a must-have for that kid, right? But then we have to have discussions around, we have a pot of money. And the pot of money is what it is. It's no different than a household checkbook, monthly budget. And if you want this, it may mean we can't we have to do less of this, or we can't do this at all. And those are some of those discussions you need to have. At the end of the day, you gather feedback from stakeholders around what they value from the components that maybe aren't the must-haves. And if we need to make some discretionary decisions around those, that becomes the decision of the committee. It's the will of the committee based on the recommendations from the superintendent. Without you getting too far into the weeds on some of the budgetary components, because a lot of that is actually the responsibility of the superintendent and the superintendent's team to bring to you a budget that addresses what the needs are of the student, that answers some of the questions that you would be seeking anyways, that we do that work on our end and bring that to you.
Follow up? All right, Ms. Brzezowski.
A successful superintendent must build strong relationships beyond the school walls. How have you worked with stakeholders like parents, unions, local businesses, the finance committee, the select board, or other town departments to align school priorities with broader community needs? How do you see your role as superintendent in fostering those relationships and ensuring the district's voice is heard in broader town conversations? Can you share a time when collaboration made a difference and how you built trust along the way?
Yeah, some of those relationships with town people, so I'll reference those here. Actually, I had sent this to you, and if you have a chance, what I'm talking about too is, the successful relationships, particularly in this case around finances. We can certainly continue to advocate for Chapter 70 changes for sure. I think we should. I think they are in need. But that is not our saving grace for Lunenburg. That's not going to happen within the next 2, 3, 4 years. There are other mechanisms that we can gather more community support around, especially our state representatives as well, our select board members, and they can advocate as well. UGA, unrestricted government aid, is largely pretty flat. And there is an opportunity that if that was keeping pace with some of the Chapter 70 increases, all of a sudden the town now has more money to be able to address their growth needs, and we're able to draw down off the other side of it, right? Working to control insurance costs are another component with our state representatives. I think there's a lot of these opportunities where if you build up more of those relationships in a collaborative fashion, and that this is a town issue moving forward, those are the types of things that we are interested in and we want to leverage. As far as my experience outside of that, I do that fairly regularly, whether it's collective bargaining, which we have all four collective bargaining units are in negotiations this year.
That's fun.
We actually have tentative agreements on 3 of the 4, and I've led 3 of the 4 negotiations this year. So we have one more we're hoping to finalize in the next week as well. So yeah, some good positive movement from that perspective. And as far as industry goes, actually one of the things we did in Pentucket was we started a robotics and engineering program. And we instituted a robotics team in the first FRC division. So these are some big robots, they're about 120 pounds. They drive around that field at about 25 miles an hour. That robotics program runs on about a $60,000 a year budget. That is largely funded out of industry sponsorship and grants that I have primarily been able to negotiate and put together. Sponsorships from local engineering places like Crystal Engineering. We have grants from NASA as well, BAE, some really big places have been able to give us some funding. And we don't look at it as just funding. We actually look for partnership in three ways, and these become the relationships you have. We're looking for industry mentors who can come and work with our students, and we're looking for internship locations and sites that we can put kids. So that's the work we've done with that. Our robotics team, only in their second year, top 30 in New England, qualified for the world competitions and everything, and only in their second year. And the kids, we're connecting the work they're doing in the class with the work they're doing after school, industry mentors coming in, and kids finishing their internships at those same locations with the companies that are sponsoring them. So all really good stuff to put together for kids. And that robotics team ended up bringing it down into the middle school and even in the elementary school. So built a whole ecosystem around it.
Any follow-up from the members?
So I see you have your PowerPoint.
Peter, I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah, so the chart there.
Can I ask you about the chart?
Yeah.
Why did you put the years in descending order instead of ascending order?
Not in any particular order, other than to be in most current, to look at it, of what would be most current. And that would be something as feedback. If people feel like it's better going the other way, then we present it the other way, right? Part of it was to see some of the changes as well. In particular, when you look at the percentage differences that, you had the override last year, you went up to 54% of the budget, and now you're going to be back down to 52% of the budget. So you can sort of see how it dips back down again. One of those conversations is, what percentage of the town budget should we aim for the schools to be? There are communities that have goals written that way, and that is generally how they try to structure it. Lexington, for instance, which I realize is a much different comparison, operates on a 75-25 comparison. 75% of the town's budget goes to the schools. In Tewksbury, it's 60-40. So, it was not that way in Tewksbury when I moved there 15 years ago. The town manager and the school department worked together to change that ratio. It was about a 50-50 ratio, recognizing that they needed to make that shift.
Thank you. We're going to go to Mr. Beardmore for a follow-up and then for a question.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up on the relationships beyond the walls of the schools. The superintendent's job is a really hard job, and it's never done. Time management is always a challenge in my experience, having known multiple superintendents here in Lunenburg over the years. And frequently, those relationships that you stipulated, and I would add, potentially some others, such as relationships with superintendents in surrounding communities, are very important. But oftentimes it just isn't enough time. What should we expect from you in terms of frequency of engagement from some of those key relationships? Town manager, Lunenburg has 3 legislators that are, I think, in need of a lot of interaction, as well as other superintendents, as well as other boards. Like, we have not engaged at all with the MIAA, for example, and there are probably 24 other examples of organizations that have that we just don't have the bandwidth to engage with.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an active member of the North Shore Superintendents Group, and I frequently actually provide professional development at Superintendent's Executive Institute as well. So I have a lot of great relationships with folks, whether it's in, maybe less so in Central Mass. I don't know as many. You're at the very tip here of Worcester County, but a lot of great relationships in Essex County, Middlesex County. But some of your neighboring communities are considered Middlesex County as well. So those are the types of relationships with my fellow superintendents and assistant superintendents that I value. Attending those roundtables are super helpful because we're not in this alone. In fact, some of those collaborations, and I heard about some of them today and had sort of referenced feeling like there are some things we can probably do, not regionalizing, but regionalizing aspects, right? Professional development. So I do that now in Pentucket, for instance. We regionalize a lot of our professional development with Newburyport and the Triton Regional School District. So we've done a lot of those types of things to do. I think you could expect me to be in regular communication with folks at Town Hall. That is, especially in the early going here, that's going to be really critical. I think, as you move ahead into next year, as your budget process finalizes here in the next coming weeks, I know a little bit of turnover in your school committee as well. Some of you won't necessarily be here. And that, the relationships and the ongoing conversations and hopefully the town manager doesn't get annoyed with me being over there so much. But, again, it's over 50% of the budget. We need to have a lot of conversations around how we can make this work collaboratively moving forward. There's a lot of projects coming up as well that's going to require a lot of teamwork together. I don't know your state legislators who are out here this way, but I have great relationships with our legislators both in the community I live and in the community I work with as well. Senator Tarr is someone who we work with routinely, he's always able to come out and take part in things, so we invite him. And we do the same thing in Tewksbury, where I live too. I had great relationships in Melrose as a principal with our legislators as well. From Representative Catherine Clark was actually a parent of mine in the building. Representative Broder, who became Mayor Broder, was also a parent. So we've had wonderful relationships with folks over the years. And it's just having the ability to pick up the phone, send an email, and say, hey, do you have a moment? Can I run something by you, right? Or, hey, I'm hearing this. Have you heard this from your other superintendents? Or are you hearing this in your other towns? Being able to have those conversations. And I do know some of the area superintendents around here as well. We have a good connection of us. It could be a lonely business. I think maybe that's what you're getting at. But I think most importantly, it's going to be critical for me to be present in town and with the folks in town and bring those people to the community, right? Instead of always having to go to them sometimes. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to Mr. Beardmore.
There are times when you're challenged by a situation when you need to call upon every personal skill you have to work it out. Can you talk about a situation where you had to use your best skills and judgment to resolve a problem? And how can that experience help us appreciate your potential as our superintendent?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't a lot of issues that a superintendent deals with that are simple issues. By the time it gets to the superintendent's desk, it's a pretty complex issue that a few people have maybe already weighed in on and contributed to. So, I like to think of it as you need to have technical leadership skills, knowledge, and know-how, and you need to have adaptive leadership skills as well. And the most complex problems are going to involve both of those. And I spoke a little bit earlier today, some of the best learning I've done was engage in a collaborative read and some professional developments of a book called High Conflict. And if you haven't read it before, highly suggest it. Amanda Ripley is the author. And it talked about various situations where people got engaged in high conflict. Most of them had nothing to do with education. But in doing so, we're able to definitely see how we can definitely find ourselves escalating into higher conflict when there's a lot of opportunities to de-escalate and get to the root of an issue. I think back specifically coming to Pentucket, and you reach into what your skill set is, you lean into it, and the first task was to address some of the literacy issues and the inconsistencies that were there. And I had to go into it and think about it from a perspective of we need literacy systems work. And so those were the conversations I started to have. It was bigger picture, but starting to have individual conversations with people to get a lay of the land of what people's understandings were. And then we started to bring more groups of people together, and we started to move the needle in the conversation around why we might need to make some changes. I knew I had to tread carefully with the high conflict, but at the same time, we have students who are in need, and we have some urgency around it. So we start to push the needle a little bit to get some urgency going, and then the pushback came. And it took a lot of skills at that point to reflect back and go, okay, now what do I do? And sometimes that is relying on some other people and having communication with trusted people. So I always do that, go to some good people. And basically the decision was we need a plan moving forward, which was great. We absolutely needed a plan. And at the moment, I thought I was sort of just going to drive the plan. And in realizing people wanted to be part of the planning, invited them in. We trained up a group of people to do it. And that group of people, including the people, some of the biggest naysayers, were part of that planning work. And that was strategic as well, bring them as in part of that. And we developed a literacy plan. That literacy plan actually serves as a model throughout the Commonwealth, and it's a model that I end up speaking about nationally when I have the opportunity to do that as well. And there are multiple aspects to it, but it's driving complex change. I think about complex change in general. There's a Lippitt-Noster model of complex change and how you account for all that. And it brings all those sort of technical leadership skills. So I had some knowledge and particular things I knew were correct, knew how to do. How do I get the technical information to the people so that they understand it? And then you have to have some adaptive leadership skills because this is a people business. And we have to engage with people in some of that complex change. Sometimes that's personal to them. And that took some skills as well. So we're a district who's made a lot of changes and improvements as far as literacy and math. When I started in 2017, the why here, the driver behind it was the fact that we were in the 37th percentile in Massachusetts in literacy in 2017. And then we went on this path of building that literacy plan. Every year it got better and better and better, and we're now in the 69th percentile in the state of Massachusetts. Math, we did the same thing. And it was actually in the 25th percentile, and we're now in the 64th percentile. So the change is even larger, an improvement. Getting people to understand the systems behind all that was really part of that complex change work. And for teachers and parents and community members to change their thoughts about the way we should be teaching literacy was a big lift, for sure.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes left. Any follow-up on this one?
I'll make it really brief because we're running out of time. You mentioned speaking nationally. How often do you speak nationally?
Yeah, I've been told I should probably go do it full time. Then I don't think it's fun if you're running around all the time like that. I get asked to speak at a conference or present something like that. It varies, probably about maybe 5-6 times a year. Sometimes it's, I guess the last 2 years, it's maybe been a little bit more frequently. So, yeah.
Thank you. Question 10. Schools rely on the daily work of many people beyond classroom teachers. How do you build a culture where all staff feel valued and heard? How have you supported these roles, and how do you plan to foster trust and partnership as well as attracting, developing, and retaining staff?
You have to be present in the buildings. And I spoke about this quite a bit today with the different groups. I think that was something that had sort of resonated as well. And you have to have strategies to keep yourself present. Sometimes that is scheduling it, just to go and walk around the building, say hello. Used to have a consultant who said, well, it's called walking the rope line. And it was sort of going out and trying to meet the problem before it comes to you and just being present and being able to have that dialogue with people. And then at the same time, your other strategy is if a particular school is having a difficult time, maybe there are some students who are dysregulated and the staff are kind of being burnt out, to go be present in that building. And it's not necessarily help with that particular work, but for them to know that I do know and understand what it is they're working on. And for me to also keep the students centered in what we're doing as well. So, I think you have to have a good listening ear. I've done a lot of talking tonight, and I guess that's my role tonight, is do a lot of talking. I do think I'm a pretty good listener, and I do sort of pay attention to things as well, and try to pick up on things, and maybe pull on some of those threads every once in a while to see if I can get to that point. And I think that's important that people feel that. This is a small enough district where I think I could be pretty present to be able to do that without also stepping on the toes of the principals. Because at the end of the day, a lot of questions people have might be better suited with the principals. So we have to have a chain of command for sure, but having that opportunity to be there, and that people know you do understand what's going on in the schools.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Mrs. Swanberry?
For Lunenburg to be successful, we need a staff that is invested in our success and individuals who are capable of wearing more than one hat. Teachers, for example, need to drive excellence and achievement, but it also helps if they can bring their additional talents to extracurriculars, clubs, coaching, sports, etc. What hiring practices would you put in place in Lunenburg to ensure that our staff is driving excellence in student achievement while also helping to meet our myriad of needs?
It's recruitment, number one. How do you establish some recruitment? So we've built up some recruitment strategies in Pentucket with some partnerships with our universities up there, Gordon College being one, Endicott, Sam State. Recruitment isn't just from the colleges, though. It's also understanding what you have to offer. Obviously, if you pay people, they generally come. However, there are a lot of other benefits that people can gather and feel in a school district. And I think making sure that they understand this is a school district that actually values their contributions, values their skills that they have. So in recruitment, part of that is establishing your HR process with your principals of when you are interviewing, are you considering people of wearing multiple hats, for instance? And I think it's a really valid point. You have to have some people who are jackknives in a small school district. You have to have some people who have a lot of flexibility to do different things, whether it's multiple certifications or the capacity to do something, a one-off out of their certification area, might very well be something that we need to consider. You think about global languages, when you have people who can teach multiple languages, they are far more valuable and useful in a school district like this. When you have someone who can teach math and an AP chemistry class as well. The fact that we could teach the chemistry along with the calculus at the same time, well, now we're in business, and extracurriculars as well. I recognize, athletics and extracurriculars play a big role. So having that be sort of part of the forefront of the marketing of the school district to prospective candidates. Instead of, if this is a place where you want to bring those talents, number one, you are a teacher first, right? You're not the field hockey coach, then a teacher. You are a teacher first, and that's your priority. But we have an opportunity with our students here to raise their excellence, but it is through bringing talented people. So part of that is just how you begin to market the school district, and that it is a district where you are welcome as a staff member and you are valued. And a lot of people appreciate that.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Quick follow-up. What do you do to find and promote the people who may not occupy a role that on paper has a ton of influence and power and importance, but they always are there? And I think of people that are all over this school district who are
Paraprofessionals.
just sort of,
Yeah.
in a job, but they do so much more than their job.
Yeah.
How do you find those people?
Oftentimes within the community, because they already have a vested interest within the community or a nearby community as well. So sometimes it's just regionally, right? I think about our custodial staff in Pentucket. We've hired multiple custodians who then said, geez, I got a friend who might be interested in this job. Let's interview them. And now all of a sudden you have some connections, and we've been able to hire numerous custodians to work for us in Pentucket who all have friend connections. And we've been able to bring multiple people on board that way. And they wouldn't recommend to bring a friend on board unless they thought it was a good place to work. and making sure people know that they are valued and appreciated. I had an opportunity to meet some of the custodians today walking around. And whether it's custodians, whether it's, bus drivers probably work for your contractor, but you employ your own food service here. You don't contract out. You employ your own custodians. You don't contract out. That's because the community values their connections to the schools. And to make sure they understand that. So.
Can I ask a question? My son is he was in 3rd grade, but he's in 4th grade now, and he, for the longest time, thought that there were 2 assistant principals at Turkey Hill, because one of the people in the office did so much and flexed into so many roles, and if there was a problem, like if he came in with a bloody nose or the door was frozen shut, this was the person that solved that problem. How do you find those? How do you identify those people once they're in the district?
Sometimes they are parents, for instance, who might find their way into some positions like that. They're pretty invested. But how do you find someone who for instance, it's probably a clerical staff, for instance, administrative assistant, who, knows where everything is, knows how to get everything done. I certainly met some of those folks today. It was very clear to me that everyone valued them, but they also knew.
You probably met this person.
Yeah, I think I did. Yes, yeah. And we can have our appreciation days, which I think they all. But sometimes it's just the casual note, handwritten note to say, hey, this is great of what you're doing over there, and people just appreciate being appreciated, especially in a small community. That's why they're here working it. That's why they're here in those jobs.
Thank you. Ms. Ashenbaum?
Please describe a decision Please describe a decision you made that in retrospect you wish you had made differently. What did you learn from this process or experience?
I had wished that I had listened to the full legal question you asked earlier about the program component and protecting students' First Amendment speech rights. However, I do, that's not really what you're going for, yeah. I think there's not one, there's many. I think we can look back. I can look back at numerous times. I mean, sometimes it's personnel-wise. I think you're always second-guessing yourself, whether someone should, someone gets to the end of their 3 years, or whether this person should be returning or not. So those are some of the hardest decisions, especially if it's someone who you kind of like as a person, but you just think maybe you can do better sometimes. And I think those are some of the hardest decisions. And I still look back, I still don't know if I made the right decision, right? And I think that sometimes that's sort of the hardest thing. I think some of those, I'm not sure how many. I think sometimes student discipline as a principal, for instance, all the time, always going back and second guessing. What if we did it this way? What if I did it that way? All the time, because in the end, it's the kid sitting in front of me. It's the parent who's there. Should we give them an opportunity to go this direction versus that direction with it? As an assistant superintendent, decisions, for instance, it's funny. Our superintendent had always said that we needed an HR coordinator, and like behind the doors, I used to, never publicly, I would say to him, I almost took it as like an insult, because I was in charge of HR. And I didn't think we really did. And I would push back to him behind closed doors, never in front of anyone else. And he said, we do. And he explained why. He came from a different state, different district. And we ended up putting that position in, and we actually promoted someone from within who I was thrilled got the job. And oh my gosh, she's been amazing. And what a lift. And he was 100% correct. We needed that position to do that. We're a bigger school district than here. We're 2,500 kids. And she's been able to do so many things with my support, my guidance. But I'm able to step back, and she never has to be told something twice. You explain something to her, and she is off with it, right? And it has allowed me to now go do some of the other things that the district needed to have done, right? So in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have pushed back as much on them. I should have listened more carefully to why he was really saying it. Because again, I think I was taking it as you don't think I'm doing it well, which wasn't it at all. He wanted some specific things to happen that, quite frankly, I didn't have time to do.
Thank you. That is our 75 minutes. At this time, I would like to invite you for your closing statement.
Sure. Boy, that was a lot. I hope we got to a lot. We got to most questions, it seems. I think in closing statement, I did provide you sort of an analysis. I didn't want to say entry plan because I'm clearly not prepared to make an entry plan. There's a lot more learning that I would need to do for entry planning. But, looking here, I think there's 3 big priorities that I would focus on. The budget stability, number 1. That is without question the number 1 priority. And I think I addressed a lot of those different things that I might do to address that. The other component is that sort of that student services and MTSS and really getting a handle on the systems around it. I think there are a lot of those systems here, but helping the people who are here do that. I think, I heard some concerns today that, a lot of the personnel that are part of those support systems are going away in this budget, and that's a concern. So one of the things is to help them understand what are some other ways we can potentially make that work. Can't replace them, but we can potentially make it work. And the third is really connecting with the community, and that would be my priority, honoring the traditions that you have here, because there's some good ones, and becoming part of the community as well. Spending time here. I hope I have pretty good high energy level. I like to bring that energy, to the district, but that's the energy I like to bring every day. I think this job demands the energy, and the community should expect it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I would like to remind the community members who are watching and who are present, there are surveys that you can fill out as well. There's a link through the emails that you receive as well as on the Facebook posts, and all the meetings throughout the evenings. Please fill out those surveys and give the school committee feedback. Thank you. At this time, I will look for a motion to adjourn at 9:06 p.m.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we'll do a roll call vote since we have a Zoom. Mr. Beardmore? Ms. Brzezowski?
Yes.
Ms. Archambault?
Yes.
Mr. Scolabrini?
Yes.
And a yes for myself. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.